St. Mark's, Volume 2, Issue Number 1, by Justin Orfanella. For over 3 decades, St. Mark's Comics was an iconic institution in the New York City comics scene, to the point where Friends had an episode that mentioned it, and Sex and the City actually filmed there. But in 2019, after failing to raise funds to combat the rising cost of rent and struggling to deal with a changing market, St. Mark's closed. It was a sad day for both fans and creators alike. I had heard of St. Mark's before they announced their closing, but it was only after the announcement that I actually visited for the first time. It was a cramped, narrow place with every open surface covered with boxes of back issues, collectibles, and other merchandise. Newly released issues were tucked neatly into a wall of cubby-like shelves. Between the size of the space, it felt more like a wide hallway than an actual store, and the crush of shoppers, it was quite difficult for both my father and me to move around. Physically, it was not how I imagined it would be. Still, despite the size, you could practically feel the weight of the store's history while you were there, though I'll admit that could also have been helped by the claustrophobic space. It was a much less grandiose and magnificent place than I'd expected, but thinking back, it makes sense. For all their popularity, comics have never seemed to lend themselves to large spaces. Even the bigger stores, like Midtown Comics and Forbidden Planet, have that feeling of holding too much for their size, with narrow aisles and wall-mounted racks reaching over your head. And in all of these places, especially the bigger ones, there are bound to be countless figures, statues, and other collectibles. There's a big intersection of comic readers and collectors, so I'm sure it pays to cater to both. All of this has held true in pretty much any comic shop I've gone to, and I've gone to a lot. If there's a lot of open space, usually it's because they also host game events, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and Dungeons & Dragons being the most common. But St. Mark's definitely wasn't one of those. It was just wall-to-wall merch, and proud of it. Fast forward to July of 2021. After 3 years, St. Mark's Comics reopened in Brooklyn's Industry City. I recently had the chance to go there with Julian and spend some time soaking in the new location, and buying more than I probably should have. The space is larger than the original, or at least less cramped. The cubby shelves for new releases are still present. I don't know if they're the originals or not, and the wall opposite them is lined with regular bookshelves filled with trades and hardcover collections. In between are a few rows of low-walled shelving and tables with various figures and merchandise, as well as boxes of back issues. The ends of the aisles have some spinning racks with new releases from some of the smaller presses as well as indie publishers. Those racks may have been from the original location. One of them was leaning to one side quite precariously, and I can't imagine that only a few months of use had caused it. The store is much wider and more open than the original shop, which I feel is a good change. Some people might disagree and might say it's lost some of the old charm, but personally, I think it makes for a much more pleasant shopping experience. It's much more enjoyable to look around without worrying that one wrong step will send a rack of crisp new comics crashing down. I think Industry City is a good location for the new shop. The whole mall is full of independent specialty stores and eateries with plenty of options to choose from. Food prices are a bit high, but that's expected when you're paying for artisan meals in Brooklyn. The place does have a surprisingly not unpleasant hipster vibe, right down to the used record shop. More about that in a later post. In other words, as a small independent comic shop, St. Mark's fits right in with the other places in Industry City. Quite honestly, despite the deep history of the original location, I can't deny that I prefer the shopping experience of the new one. It's open, bright, and welcoming, and for a small shop has quite a good selection. Brooklyn is a little out of the way, for me at least, but it's certainly worth the occasional visit. Then again, I'll go to pretty much any comic shop I can get to, so maybe I'm not the best judge here.